Welcome to the Nerds Now Playing podcast, recorded in Salina, Kansas at Feely Creative. I'm joined here with Tim. Tim, how are you doing today?
I am doing fantastic. It is a nice Friday morning. I am ready for the day. I've had my coffee and some delicious food.
Oh, you did? Well, it's good that you had your coffee there.
Yeah.
Decaf still?
Today, actually, no, surprisingly. I think part of the reason what I was dealing with before was maybe the fact that I was making my coffee perhaps a bit too strong. Because I used to make it in the French press and I would put like 3 scoops of the coffee grounds in there, and maybe that was a little bit too much. So I think when I get it elsewhere, like at an actual coffee shop, it doesn't seem to bother my system as much.
Oh, but you're all wide awake, ready to go?
Surprisingly, yes.
And jump into today's podcast?
Oh, yeah.
Well, for our first topic, what have you been watching?
Well, this week I have been watching Danganronpa 3, which is an anime. It is a direct sequel to the game Danganronpa 2, which is part of a series. They're all kind of... The gameplay style is very much like a visual novel, if that makes sense. The basic premise is that these people who go to what's basically an elite high school, they're all considered to be ultimates because they all have this like a specific talent, like the ultimate baseball star, the ultimate gamer, stuff like that they really excel at. And in the first game, they basically wake up with no memory of things that happened before, and they're forced to take part in this killing game. In which that's the only way they can supposedly get out of this, because all the doors are locked and all the windows are bolted over. Basically how the game works is that after a certain amount of time, somebody will die, and then you have to investigate that death. And then it's kind of like a point and click sort of thing when you investigate. And then once the investigation is done, you all go to a class trial, and you have to, during the trial, like it's kind of like a debate. So like you'll see statements that come up in arguments, and then you have to fire what are called truth bullets, which are what you get from the investigation at statements. It's kind of a different style. The gameplay is not necessarily my favorite, but the story is what's interesting.
Would you say it's more story or more game, or is there a balance there?
There's a definite balance there, I would say.
Is it kind of like, what would you compare it to? I haven't seen anything about this game.
Well, it's been around. I don't know if it's necessarily indie. It's been by Spike Chunsoft. Spike Chunsoft, I think is what it's called, is the company. But basically, it's almost in a sense like JRPG. You know how like in JRPGs, like the text will come up, and you cycle through. So it involves that kind of the gameplay element. And then when you're moving around, it's kind of like a first-person view as you're moving around through the hallways, and you can look around. You have this little. I don't want to call it target, but there's a thing that you basically have that you can move around. That's what you use to click on things. It's if you have Xbox Game Pass, it is on there. It is also on the PlayStation, and I believe it's probably on Steam. There are, I believe, at least 4 games. So there's Danganronpa 1, 2, then there's a spin-off after 2. That's kind of that one is more of a third-person shooter style, but you're still shooting like truth bullets at different things. And then there's the anime, and then there's one more game, I think. So it's about like 4 games in the series. It's interesting if you if you want to put time into it.
Cool. So and that's on Xbox and PlayStation.
Currently, yes, and probably Steam as well. And it's called Danganronpa.
Danganronpa.
Danganronpa. There's an N. Ronpa. That's okay. It's weird when you get through it, but there's also a really weird character that I should mention. The people who like make the rules, quote unquote, for the games, you're being held hostage by basically a sadistic teddy bear.
Interesting. I'll have to look into this game.
It's pretty fun. It's like I said, the gameplay style itself might not be for everyone, but the story is what's really interesting about it.
I'll have to check it out if I can remember how to say it, let alone spell it. But that sounds like a fun game. I've been leading up to a review. We're going to be reviewing Titanic today. I've been watching. I watched a movie on Netflix called Arctic to get me in that cold feeling vibe for the winter and stuff.
I feel like you could have just stood outside for 20 minutes.
I could have. And maybe I could have watched this movie out there and gotten a better feeling for what they're dealing with. So Arctic is a movie that stars Mads Mikkelsen The movie opens with has had a plane crash in the Arctic, and it's a survival movie where he's stuck out in the Arctic and he needs to get saved. And so I think it's pretty good. It's on Netflix. He's by himself at first on this plane, and I believe they allude to the fact that maybe a co-pilot of his died, but he's by himself and he's trying to get rescued. He's working a hand crank radio transmitter, I believe. And very kind of unsuccessful with that, although a Chinese, not specifically Chinese, but a Chinese research helicopter comes and he's almost rescued, but then it crashes too.
Oh no.
And the whole movie, he keeps getting the short end of the stick, but this helicopter comes and crashes too, and there's one survivor on that helicopter, but they are unresponsive.
Oh no.
And so he's not only trying to survive himself, but he's has this person he has to take care of too, who's mostly unconscious throughout the whole movie. So that just adds to his predicament there.
Oh gosh, I feel like there's a lot of, I think, winter survivors, because what is it? The Gray, is it?
The Gray, yeah.
Is it? That's not the one with Leonardo DiCaprio, right?
The Gray, no, that's maybe The Revenant.
That's what it's called. The Gray is Liam Neeson.
Yeah, Liam Neeson's.
That's right. And then, let's see. Well, we actually watched a different one at movie night not too long ago, Cliffhanger, which is also a winter survivalist / thriller.
Yeah. I'd say Arctic is maybe a little less thriller. But I think it's pretty good. It's a good little watch. Not a very long movie, but it's a good survival movie where he's dealing with the elements, a polar bear, and a couple other things. But I think it's real good. It's available on Netflix, so I thought it was a good watch.
Now, does he slice open the polar bear like Luke, like Han with the tauntaun in Star Wars to stay warm?
He did not. I think it would have been, lost opportunity for him and the movie.
I mean, if it's not in every movie, then it's a lost opportunity. Now, are you super into survival movies or like disaster movies?
I do like them. Yeah. I'm trying to think of what else maybe I've watched along those lines. I used to when it comes to disaster movies, I think like Deep Impact or Armageddon. Those movies count. Would you say?
Yeah, I would say so. So, are you more into global disaster movies or on a smaller scale like Titanic?
Oh, both. I like them both.
Okay.
I think they're both pretty cool.
Do you have a favorite one?
Oh, probably not. Oh man. I don't know. And you know what? Titanic's a disaster movie too. But
it is true.
I don't know if I'd say Titanic is my favorite, but I did like Deep Impact when that came out. There was this period where dueling movies would come out, like Deep Impact and Armageddon or Volcano and what's that other movie with Pierce Brosnan in it?
I can't think of that one. The only other
Dante's Peak.
Oh yeah, I've heard of those. The only other disaster movie I can think of right now is Twister. Or wait, is it The Core?
The Core.
I think I have
it is
seen
kind
The
of a
Core, or I've
disaster
seen parts
movie.
Of The Core.
Yeah.
Well, that one is. Who's it? Who plays Harvey Dent in the Batman movies?
In the newer ones. Oh, yes, I know. He has the dimpled chin.
I think so. Blonde hair.
Yeah.
Yeah, that guy.
What is his name?
I can't think of it now.
But he's in that movie, The Core. It's been a while since I've seen that.
That one I feel like I've seen. My brother and sister-in-law are into disaster movies as well. So,
well, let's move on to we have to move on to our other topic here, and I have a little mini topic, which is the Oscars. The Oscars. That little event you may or may not watch anymore.
Well, I don't know. I guess it's probably available on YouTube these days. I have not watched many of them, although a few years ago I did specifically watch all the Oscar movies that were nominated that year. And then I went, this was back when I was living in Lawrence, and Liberty Hall hosted a viewing of the Oscars. So I think they had wine and champagne and stuff that you could have at your table as you were kind of sitting there watching. It was a fun time. Went with a couple of friends.
It's been a while since I've seen the Oscars, but they are coming up this weekend, and so that is the topic of today. And our movie that we're reviewing is Titanic. And Titanic, swept the 1998 Oscars. So I was wanting to talk about that a little bit. So I didn't know if do you know what the Best Picture nominees were for 1998?
I was 6 at the time, so no.
Oh, wow. Most people just kind of know that. I was 11. I took notes. Well, the Best Picture nominees for 1998, I looked this up, and it's an interesting list. So, and of course, Titanic was one of them, but it was Titanic, As Good as It Gets,
Heard of it.
Good Will Hunting,
Seen it.
L.A. Confidential,
Seen parts of it, maybe.
and The Full Monty.
Love it.
The movie?
Yeah.
You've seen the movie. Okay.
And the musical.
So on this, so that list, you haven't seen all of them.
No. I've seen Good Will Hunting. It's a fantastic movie. I think I've seen parts of L.A. Confidential, but I've never actually sat down and watched that one. Yeah, I'd say I've maybe seen, I think, a third of them, maybe a third to half of the ones that you just listed.
So having just listed it off, even though I haven't seen all the movies, do you think Titanic deserved that win?
Now that I have watched it again, against those ones, probably. I do think content-wise, I was a little more. I think I like Good Will Hunting better than I like Titanic personally. Then again, I love Robin Williams, but I also think that I don't know. There's something very down to earth about that movie, and Titanic is such a grand scale that like I'm not surprised that it won the Oscar. But you know.
Well, I haven't actually seen The Full Monty.
You should. Do you know much about that movie?
I actually know nothing except that Monty was there and he was full.
So the basic premise of that movie is, and I'll try and do it really quick. This guy, I think it takes place in England. I'm pretty sure. So this guy is he has divorced his wife and he has a son, and he has had a hard time keeping a job, or rather the job he was working, I think, in a factory like just shut down, or he got laid off. Like a bunch of people got laid off. And so he's having trouble being able to make his child support payments. And he's been informed that if he doesn't make payments soon, that he will no longer be able to see his son. And so the women in this town like to all go to a kind of Chippendales style strip club, essentially. And so the scheme he comes up with to make money fast is that he and his fellow workers should become male strippers so that they can make money really quick. And so he can keep seeing his kid. And they end up kind of getting this I want to say ragtag, but it's like a bunch of like very different style, like physical body types that end up doing this. And the hook that they try and use is that they will go the full Monty, which means completely showing everything to try and get everyone to come in. And it's just, it's weird to say that it's heartwarming, but like there's a certain element of it that's heartwarming. Like his love for his son is really, really nice. And there is a musical, like a stage adaptation that has really fantastic songs. Like I legitimately, there's a part of me that really wants to do that show, though I'm terrified to do that show. Because it's just like, there's a couple songs in that show that like will make you cry.
I'll have to maybe check it out. One thing I did do, I haven't seen, because I'm pretty sure I haven't seen like I've seen As Good as It Gets.
I have not seen that one.
I have seen L.A. Confidential.
I haven't.
And I've seen little pieces of Good Will Hunting, but I've not actually watched it all the way through.
You've never watched the whole thing of Good Will Hunting? What is wrong with you?
I don't know. It's one of those movies that slip through the cracks.
Shame.
Yeah, it is. But I have the luxury of having that first time viewing experience to watch
That is
it.
true.
So,
that is true.
So you should be jealous about that.
I did kind of experience that with Titanic this week. I technically have seen it before, but that was back when I was maybe 10 or 11, and that was back when it had come out on VHS. So it was like the two tapes.
Uh-huh.
And I kind of, I don't want to say vowed, but I kind of vowed as a child to never watch that movie again, because as a kid, it felt like the longest thing in existence, and I had no interest in it.
Yeah, it was pretty long. And I do remember, I also had the VHS with the two parts.
Now, you saw this in theaters, right?
I did.
Now, did you walk away from that theater experience like loving this movie? Like, were you like was like young little you just sitting there going, "Yay, disaster movie! The ship sank."
Well, when I first watched the movie, I was with my parents and I was with my brother too, who was 3 years younger than me. So I was probably the movie came out in December 1997, so I would have probably been 11. I'm just gonna say 11, so I can move on from that. But when we watched it, it was in the month of probably either December or January, so it was cold. But I was pretty. It made me super fascinated with the boat itself. But I remember when we left the theater, it was super cold. I remember us all as a family running to the car because it was so cold. And at the time, growing up, we had a hot tub at home, and I remember we all being cold, watching this movie that's cold for the characters in there. We all got in the hot tub, and we're very appreciative of our situation compared to those in the movie. But anyways, I hadn't seen all the movies that were nominated for Best Picture in 1998, but I did watch the trailers for them all, and my takeaway was, yeah, Titanic should probably have won that, I think. I'll go through really quick the Oscars that the Titanic won. They swept the 1998 Oscars. They won for Best Music, Best Directing, Best Cinematography, Best Costume Design, Best Original Score, Best Picture, Best Visual Effects, Best Production Design, Best Sound Editing, Best Sound Mixing, and Best Film Editing.
Good Lord.
Yeah, it was probably a real drag for everyone else in attendance for that.
They should have just done it in advance and say this, like, all the Oscars this year are just Titanic.
Yeah. So
in fact, they should have just renamed the Oscars Titanic.
So that is a lot of Oscars for a movie to win. So let's kind of get into.
Has any movie won the same amount?
Well, gosh, I don't remember offhand, but I know Lord of the Rings: Return of the King also swept at the Oscars. I'm not sure how many they did. I don't know. Okay.
We were looking into the studio. Several of us are Lothar fans, but.
Our control room expert is a huge Lord of the Rings fan, but he didn't know, so I'm not sure how much of a fan he is. But
you should know. You just rewatch those movies.
Well, but I'm not a self-declared, Lord of the Rings super fan. But
sad.
But
you should be.
Well, let's just say 11 too. Oh well, we just found out from the control room that there was 11 Oscars that Return of the King won.
So if you were to pit Return of the King to Titanic, which would you say is a better movie?
Oh.
And you know the right answer.
Oh, yes, but do I? Oh, gosh, I don't know, because oh, gosh, I don't know. That's not fair. The thing, though, with the Lord of the Rings movies is my favorite is the Fellowship of the Ring.
Oh, I would agree.
So with that in mind, I don't know. I think it would. I don't want to get hate mail, so let's just leave it as a mystery. Let's say
you'll just get an anonymous note later in your office.
All right. So with that, let's get into our movie review of Titanic. Okay. So the Titanic. Do you think it deserved all those Oscars?
I think it. I think it. I don't know about necessarily all of those Oscars. Let me look at the thing again. Cinematography.
It was just all of them.
Just all of them in general.
Yeah. It was all.
I mean, it's such a grand. Like I said, it's such a grand scale movie. It's hard to beat. It is just in terms of like the scope of everything. I would say it probably deserves it. Yeah.
So this movie, I have seen it a number of times, and I am a big fan of this. I'm a huge fan of James Cameron.
Would you say he's your favorite director? Because I know you're a pretty big Spielberg person.
Well, he's right up there. I mean, it depends on what kind of mood of it. I think Spielberg is overall my favorite, but James Cameron, I've watched his movies from the first Terminator, Terminator 2, Aliens. I've seen The Abyss a number of times, but and True Lies. I've seen those movies so many times, and they are so impressive to me. And because I think Terminator 2 is probably one of the best action movies ever made, I think.
Are action movies like your favorite genre? I'm curious.
Sure. I think so. I think maybe thrillers though,
Okay.
ultimately. But yeah, so I watched this movie again, and it had probably been at least 6 years since I've seen it, so a good chunk of time. But when the DVD menu even popped up, they're playing that music that they have on
Oh,
Titanic.
the Celine Dion.
Yeah, the Celine Dion stuff, and like it kind of like transported me back to 1997,
Oh,
like
wow.
the 90s. That's just like, oh yeah, I remember all this movie, like how big of a deal it was, and it is super grand in scale and kind of like epic in a way. Now, this what we were talking about, Lord of the Rings. This was 4 years before the Fellowship of the Ring, and so to me, that's like super impressive what they were doing with the special effects, the costumes that are in this movie. Once you get into the 1912 time period, it's pretty authentic, I think, with the details that they have on all the characters and the costuming and
Yeah, I would agree.
all the production design that they have. It's like this is a real deal blockbuster. I think it's like super impressive. I think it's really good.
Which, by the way, I was going to ask, would you happen to know? So, speaking of the VFX, all the cold breath,
Yeah.
was that all digitally inserted, or did they make the studio super cold?
They did do that digitally.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, because as someone who's done some like small VFX stuff for occasionally the short films that we've done, like it's a pain. So to do that for like all those people,
Which would have been one digital effect of a bunch. but so what are your overall thoughts of the movie?
overall, I actually find now that I've seen it as an adult, I think it's really well done. I like the way that they kind of start off and showing them talking to future Rose as she kind of remembers back. I like that angle. I didn't realize Bill Paxton was in this movie.
With his one
earring.
One earring.
Yeah, I didn't expect that either. Yeah, I like it overall. I think the characters and the story, I mean, the story is compelling enough as it is because it's the Titanic, which is interesting. Although obviously there is a certain amount of fictitiousness to the characters in the situation.
Of course.
Like with the love story, at least, anyway. But I think it's well done. I think the characters are interesting. I like Jack and Rose. I mean, it's hard not to. Not a huge fan of Billy Zane's character. I mean, I know you're supposed to like hate him anyway. But I can't. I don't know. I'm just not a huge fan of Billy Zane, I don't think.
Oh, poor Billy Zane. Sorry, Billy Zane fans out there.
Like I mean, he does like. I will say he does his job well, which is to make me not like him in this movie.
So the movie opens up with old time footage of the Titanic, which wasn't original footage. That was stuff they made to look old. But one of the things that I liked about the Titanic movie, both when I first watched it and now, is it really like it makes you like interested in Titanic overall, like the ship and stuff. The movie opens up with that what looks like old time footage. They're on the ship. They're waving goodbye on the before they move away from the dock and go out to the open sea, and then after that, it's in present day. They're combing the sea floor in their submersibles.
Yeah.
And I think it does a super good job of setting up the tragedy of the Titanic, because they're showing you the wreckage, which James Cameron actually dived down to the site numerous times, and actually was there, and they some of that footage of the Titanic on the seafloor is actually the Titanic on the seafloor,
Which is really impressive.
So for me, like it really like gives you a sense of the aftermath of it, and seeing the real world footage of it is incorporated in the movie so well. And because I think with movies like this, you have to like kind of understand some of the technical reasonings for what happened and some stuff, and the way they kind of like bake it into the dialogue, it's not like super heavy handed, like and because when they bring on Rose, the older Rose, they explain some of the physics and some of the
as
things
to
that
why
happened
it
when
sank.
like why it sank and stuff,
Yeah.
and they kind of like incorporate it with a character who's quite humorous, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And most movies I think kind of struggle with that kind of stuff, but they kind of like keep things moving along.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
But we understand like the size, what happened,
Mm-hmm.
why it broke up, and all those things, so that later when you watch the actual events happen in the 1912 when this ship is actually sinking, you kind of have like some context for what's
Mm-hmm.
going on. So I think that's super impressive when I was watching this again, and it made me like want to look up the Titanic again and like rediscover the facts about it and stuff.
Which I will agree, like it has caught my interest enough that I would be interested to watch a documentary or two about it. Now, have they brought the Titanic back? They brought it up off the seafloor now, haven't they?
No. Well, the ship's still on the seafloor.
Oh, okay.
It's way too heavy, and it's like when the front of the ship went down and crashed in the ocean, like it's buried underneath like 20 feet of dirt and stuff. So it's like, but
they brought elements of it up.
yeah, they've brought elements. There is a Titanic museum, which I forget where it is, but I have been there. Well, I know they have one in Branson, Missouri,
Yeah.
which my family went to, and they have like things like silverware they pulled up and some stuff like that, which is kind of neat. And they have in Las Vegas, they have what they call the Big Piece. It's a piece of the I don't want to say the wrong side of the ship, but it's one of the metal platings of the side of the ship that they have.
Cool.
They recovered from the sea-floor, which is pretty cool. I think it's like 15 feet high and like 20 feet across or something. Pretty cool. But
Now, outside of like, as far as like disasters, like in real life disasters of like voyages of things, is this like the first big one that we can? Because I know like obviously there is the Hindenburg, and then there was Challenger. Like they were all like horrifying disasters that lost a lot of lives.
I think it was the biggest loss of life on a passenger cruise ship at that time.
Because there were 1,500 that didn't make it.
Well, there's 1,500 total passengers, and I think somewhere around 700 survived.
Okay. Around half.
Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, so we have. What was interesting watching this movie again was they have this love story of Jack and Rose, epic love story from the late '90s, Rose and Jack.
That is very true. It is very compelling as well. I mean, like I will say, it seemed like she was so sick of her upbringing of trying to be in like that the upper class that she just didn't really agree with being part of that. And I don't know. There is a part of me that sees their romantic relationship as a little bit close to Romeo and Juliet, which I'm not a fan of that particular play, and that kind of like love at first sight kind of thing, which not necessarily happens with Jack and Rose, but I don't know how it feels more like a fling than like true love kind of thing.
Yeah.
Granted, in the situation that they were in, I could see them like bonding very quickly, but. It is definitely a very epic love story. I will admit that.
Well, yeah. But it is interesting because Jack is a third class passenger that he won his ticket. He won his ticket. He wasn't even supposed to be there, but he won his ticket on the Titanic. And then Rose is the first class, upper class person. And so it is kind of interesting to see the dynamics they have. We're like a audience surrogate of both the first class and the low third class passengers, and that dynamic that there is, because they were separated on the ship, and so we get to kind of see a little bit of that in like what life was for each different class, which is kind of neat.
I did enjoy it. There's a scene where they go to Jack has dinner with the upper class after saving Rose, and after that dinner they go down to the lower decks and they go to like a real like party, not like an upper class, like a normal person party.
Yeah,
I'll put it that
party
way.
you'd want to be at.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it looked like a lot of fun. And so, yeah, I don't know. It is interesting to see that dynamic. And man, I'm sure there's still a certain degree of people of the higher class that like are more concerned with breeding, for lack of a better way to put it. and try. And obviously, like the only reason she was engaged to this guy was because apparently their family was broke.
Right.
Which, I mean, that would not for that time period. I don't think that was very uncommon.
No.
Because
Yes.
marriage for a long time was more about like acquisition of land and status rather than
Their family had to survive, and that was the way to do it.
There was a way to do it.
Marrying rich, but yeah. So I could see like there's a scene in the movie that comes a little bit later when Rose is watching a girl fold a napkin on her lap, and she's getting that realization that she's trapped in this prison of rich society, I guess you could say. And then that's when she that's when she decides to go be with Jack.
That's late. That is that right before the draw me like one of your French girls.
That is before that. Yeah.
Okay, I thought so.
Yeah. Unless I'm wrong, and then that's terrible. So,
and if you're wrong, that is truly sad because you've seen this movie way more than I have.
That's true. Especially just finished it last night.
Same. So
finished it at the same time in the morning when the Titanic finally sank,
which was
2:40 a.m. I'm just guessing, but
if you were up that late, oh my! How are you this chipper?
Well, I sleep very well.
Jealous.
So Jack. So there's a lot of cool scenes to talk about in this movie, like that I think were super super cool. And before they even get to the actual sinking stuff, there's a part earlier on in the movie where Rose and now I'm forgetting. I think Mr. Andrews, is it? They're talking about the lifeboat situation on the deck.
Yeah.
And what I find really cool about that is like they're sneaking in more information about what's going to happen later. So we know like there's not enough lifeboats, which is common, a lot of common knowledge stuff there. But when you actually see the sinking, there's so many people on the deck and like so much chaos and stuff. But I like a lot of stuff. There's some old, I don't know if you've seen them. There's old photographs of the Titanic and all like stuff on the deck, and there's little blink and you miss it moments. There's like a boy spinning a top on the deck.
I remember seeing that. Yeah.
There's some like interesting like historical callbacks there.
So those were taken from the photographs.
They're inspired from the photographs.
Oh.
Yeah. So
I did know there's a scene later on when the ship is sinking. There's a couple who are in bed.
Yeah.
Which evidently, and this is kind of spoiling a little bit of the trivia for later, but I'll go and say it now. So evidently that couple was supposed to be the owners of
Macy's.
Yes, thank you. Who, and I guess the wife was offered a spot on the boats and decided to stay with her husband. And I guess some of Rose's lines, like the "if you jump, I jump" thing, are actually based off of her.
Oh, really?
According to the trivia that I found.
Interesting.
So it's like I think it was like "if you die, I die" or something like that. So which is that's really sweet.
So before the sinking of the Titanic, though, I think this movie is just really cool how it shows the ship. They're like you go into the engine room, they're showing stuff in there. This is just such an impressive movie. I think visually with there's a combination of miniatures and special effects with CG and practical effects that are just constantly happening. That I think are just so impressive. And I was reading that the part where Rose is standing off over the edge, like she's going to jump.
Oh yeah.
I guess that was filmed over months because they have different setups and stuff. For like one was on a green screen, one was in a studio that had a black void behind them for the nighttime, and then they had another setup where they had a crane shot overhead. So I thought that was very interesting when I was watching it back with that in mind. A very stressful scene there that was shot over a couple months, but just so much happening visually, like constantly. Like this movie's like epic in a different way. And that's all before we even get to the actual sinking. Now, in the sinking part is where a lot of people, obviously that's the big event there.
Oh yeah.
Which watching it again, so I watched it at home, and it's intense when they hit the iceberg. It is from the moment that happens. Like this is almost like it was not scary to me, but I forgot how intense the movie was.
Now, I wonder if you would have a different. I'm sure you'd have a different experience if you hadn't, like, going into this movie, if you had no information about the Titanic, like didn't know that it was an actual real ship, or didn't know that it sank or hit an iceberg. What that experience would be like watching that disaster. Like, would it, I wonder if that would give you more like tension and more just wonder like what, like, is it actually like,
There's a couple of parts I remember from the movie when Jack and Rose are running through the hallways, and in a couple sequences in the movie, they briefly show like an immigrant couple or immigrants to America that speak not English, I guess, and so they have a translator book that they're reading from, and they're trying to read the signs in the hallway to figure out where to go. They don't really focus and dwell on that very much, but they're there, and so I just remember thinking like, there's so much confusion happening here, and you have people from different nationalities and stuff, and like the stress that would have.
Oh, I can't even imagine.
And so I thought that was really captured well, some little elements like that. And of course, Rose, like I would hope most passengers didn't do this, but Rose went back down into the hull of the ship to find Jack, and like they have those moments where the lights are flickering off.
Yeah, I was waiting for someone to be electrocuted.
And I was like, oh man, I do not want to like. You're in a hallway. It's wet. It's cold, and then pitch black. Like that's too scary. Like that's too. Oh man, that was like freaking me out when I was like sitting thinking about that a little bit. Do not.
It would freak me out too. Which I will say, this movie has spurred me to try and track down the Poseidon Adventure, because I think that's like a similar disaster.
Yeah, the Poseidon Adventure. That the ship fully capsizes in that one.
Ah, gotcha.
But yeah, so many little elements in this movie that this like super freaky. And there's a part where Jack was handcuffed to a pipe in there because they accused him of stealing the diamond, the heart of the ocean, which is centered and talked about in this movie.
Villain Billy Zane.
Yeah, and so Leo's like stuck there.
Which I totally called the axe. Her finding an axe to cut him loose. Like,
oh yeah.
Well, that's like, there's only two things that I can think of that they would be able to find: either an axe, which likely would have been on the side of it in one of those hallways, or like a pair of bolt cutters.
Bolt cutters.
Like, something.
Yeah. And well, when speaking of the axe thing, it did make me realize how funny this movie is. Like they slip in jokes like effortlessly in this movie sometimes. So in the case of the axe, though, she has to cut the cuffs off from him, but before she does,
she closes her eyes.
Well, before. Yeah, she does, doesn't she? But before she even swings, Jack is like, no, take a practice swing first. And then she goes and axes the cabinet. And then he's like, well, try it again, but hit it in the same spot. And then she just totally biffs it.
Yeah. He's like, well, that's enough practice. Let's just try it for real.
Yeah.
I mean, in that situation, I mean, you're going to die if you don't, so you might as well just try it.
But luckily she was successful on that. But,
thankfully.
But I think the movie like has a lot of funny moments in it that like that. That just it's pretty impressive because there's a lot of scary, tense stuff happening, and they have a lot of levity with some comedy and stuff in there. So, so I think this is a great movie. It gets a lot of eye rolls sometimes when you're talking about it, but I think it's a really action-packed movie. Has a lot of drama.
Oh, definitely. Well, especially like once you get to the actual disaster part of it, like oh my gosh, just the chaos and seeing the different people trying to get off, which I feel like would be very accurate to human nature. Like people are going to want to get off. And, the part where the actual front of the ship, when they're at the top of the back, and the ship is coming down this way, like just seeing like the I don't know how high up that would have been at that point, but
I think I saw somewhere it was like around 13 stories
up my
high
gosh.
or something like that.
So like there's a moment where like, you see a couple people fall from that distance, especially the guy who hit the propeller.
Yeah, Propeller Man.
Propeller Man, soon to be the sequel to Titanic. Yeah, that is that just like I don't know about you, but I have a fear of heights, or rather, a fear of falling from them. So that kind of stuff makes me very tense.
Yeah, and then the sinking is they have the ships breaking up. You hear the metal and stuff. So very uneasy movie. And then when the ship actually sinks, all those people in the water, like I can't. Oh man, I don't know if you've ever jumped in a cold pond. I've done a polar
I have
plunge
not.
before, and it sucks. So it's insane.
I've never
things.
had the desire to do that. So I did notice. I was going to ask. So I realized it's chaos in human nature, but there's a moment when they're in the water where a guy is just straight up trying to drown Rose.
Uh-huh.
Why?
Well, a lot of victims in drowning will it causes panic.
Right.
And when you're panicked, you're not really thinking rationally. And a lot of times, like this is an issue when if you've ever done or know anything about lifeguarding or
I
something.
don't.
If there's a drowning person in the water, you don't swim to them because they might pull you under and stuff.
So I guess now that I think about it, he was probably trying to like push himself up out.
Yeah, to
by
breathe.
using her. Oh, okay, that makes a lot more sense.
Yeah. So very common with drowning victims.
Interesting.
So it's important to like bring a life preserver or
So would that be like why they have like the lifesaver thing that they throw out?
one of the reasons. Yep.
Oh, okay.
But it's just generally dangerous to save a drowning person like that because they might be a little frantic and panicked, and so they're just trying to breathe desperately. So
Which makes sense. Yeah, I mean, especially in that situation where it's probably sub-zero temperatures. We should probably talk about probably one of the biggest debates or biggest things in the movie.
the door.
Yes, the door. Now, for a long time, James Cameron said that he did research and that it's very unlikely that they could have both been on the door and survived. And to that point, MythBusters actually did an episode where they talked about that.
I saw it.
And at the time, they did say that it was, I believe, I don't know if they said that one was busted or not. But they went as far as like trying to like, in theory, they could have both been on it, but it would have submerged enough that it would have been a problem still. Now he just recently came out and said that they could have.
I didn't watch the full video, but I think it's possible more so that maybe he could have survived, but I don't know. It would have been really tricky anyway. In the movie, they are struggling to get on it, but
Yeah.
if you factor in the fact that they're freezing cold and that's enough for me to like, I don't know, that the whole process would be harder. I think if you were like on a summer day in a lake somewhere on that door, you could figure it out. But in the Arctic waters of the Atlantic,
Yeah.
I don't know. That would be pretty hard. But I don't know. It didn't really bother me. It didn't really bother me when I first watched the movie, I don't think. But other people were bringing attention to that. But watching it again, I didn't really. That fact, that idea that he could definitely survive didn't really stick out to me too much. But,
It didn't really with me either. Like the only way he could have is if he had found other things floating, which there was a lot. I would imagine there would have been a lot of luggage that would have surfaced that you could have used.
Maybe.
But it's hard to say.
Yeah. So, anyways, Titanic, I think a great movie. I think it's one of James Cameron's best, if not his actual best movie. So much going on in that movie. The fact that it was even made was kind of crazy. So I think that's kind of concluding up our review of Titanic. Do you have any more thoughts on that?
On the movie itself, no, I do think I would definitely recommend watching it now that I have seen it again. I have a few friends, like one of my friends, this is her favorite movie of all time. And now that I have watched it, I can see why. I think it's definitely worth watching at least once or a couple times. I mean, if it's your favorite movie, then watch it all the time. But,
yeah, that's right.
I think it well deserved the Oscars that it got. We should probably talk about some of the other trivia.
Yeah, let's move on and do a little bit of trivia real quick here before we wrap up here.
Now, there was one thing you were telling me the other day as far as like the scope of building things. So they only built half of the ship. Is that correct?
They from what I remember, they built the bow of the ship. They built the whole ship, but they didn't build the it was either the starboard side that they didn't build, but they built the whole one side of the ship. Yeah.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
And it was divided up into three parts, so that they could on the front part they could angle it down into the water, and the bow of this is it the bow control room? Please help me. The back of the ship they could the stern, yeah, okay. So the stern they could raise vertically.
Oh, gotcha. That makes sense.
So which is pretty cool. And with the fact that they didn't build the other side of the ship, any scenes that were filmed on that side of the scene, they had a mirror that those shots. So if Rose if they had Kate Winslet's hair parted one way for the one side of the ship, they had to part it the other way for the other side of the ship because they were going to mirror it.
Oh my gosh.
And if they had like White Star Line written on their shirts and stuff, they had to reverse that too on their actual physical shirts too.
I cannot even begin to imagine being the continuity person.
The logistics of that is crazy.
Yeah,
we make videos and we have to consider a lot of logistics and stuff, but that's
on such a whole other level.
You're dealing with water and now flipped backwards shirts and stuff.
Which, speaking of the water, so do you know how much water they used for this movie?
I have no idea.
So I looked it up, and I believe it was 17 million gallons of water.
That's basically the Atlantic.
At that point, yeah. And I think it was in like a 40 acre tank, I believe is what I saw. And that is just insane. That's I mean, I know they have a lot of other movies that, have like rain and stuff, but like stuff like I can't even imagine making something that big.
So James Cameron, he wanted to use real footage of the Titanic's,
right, you mentioned that earlier.
Remains, and but he didn't want to just shoot it inside the submersible that had been done on an IMAX documentary that came out years prior.
Right.
But his brother Mike Cameron was involved in the movie, and they together developed with Panavision. They developed a deep sea camera system capable of withstanding the depths of the ocean, which I think equates to 400 atmospheres of the pressure of, or 5, which I don't even know what this actually even means. I just know the numbers are 5,878 psi.
That sounds insane.
But that's super cool though, because then they.
Oh, pardon me. I'm sorry.
My gosh, that ocean water is getting to you.
It is. It's all that salt.
And one, so it's really cool that they had the actual footage of the thing, and they were able to. They had to make new systems to even be able to film
that. Is impressive. I don't know how many movies like the only other thing I can think of like that on that level of like technical innovation, as far as filmmaking goes. Jerry Lewis is the one who invented like playback in cameras for because he was directing and starring in his own movies.
Oh yeah.
And so he made it so you could look in like the cameras he was using, because at the time that wasn't a thing. So he made it so you could play back and rewatch the scenes, so he could just reshoot it if it needed to be, which has nothing to do with Titanic, but
yeah,
just for filmmaking in general, like this is impressive.
Yeah,
for sure.
I think we have time for one more thing of trivia.
Okay.
And so there's the scene where Jack is drawing Rose, like one of his French girls. So one thing that I thought was interesting is the hands you see actually sketching Rose are James Cameron's hands.
Really?
Yeah. Which on second viewing, it's a little more obvious because his hands are older, than old Jack's. And not only that, but James Cameron is left-handed, so they also had to flip that as well to match Leonardo DiCaprio's right-handed character.
That's really cool. What now? So would he? I guess wouldn't matter. Would you have had to flip the drawing as well, have to draw it in a different way?
I think it required James Cameron just to be so good at drawing that it didn't matter. But I have no idea how that went about.
That's pretty cool though. I gotta admit that's really neat. That wasn't something I was aware of at the time of the movie. So yeah, I think it's impressive. Now, from your perspective, is James Cameron the best overall?
He's the best what?
Is he the greatest of all time?
Oh, he is the GOAT. Yeah. I think he's one of the best. James Cameron. You can't outdo James Cameron. This movie made bajillions of dollars.
I believe it. I mean, he's just they just released, or he just came out with the second Avatar film,
Also making bajillion dollars.
and dealt a lot with water. I believe. I have not yet seen
a lot of water,
but
yeah. Spoiler: there's a lot of water. A lot of water in all of his movies.
so he has a fascination.
All right. Well, I think that wraps up our review of Titanic. Any other little thoughts, Tim?
No, other than I guess it's coming back out in theaters. This week, is it this weekend?
It came out last weekend. Yeah.
Last weekend. Okay. Currently, as we're speaking, it is late February 17th. So it might still be in theaters when this podcast goes out. I feel like if you haven't seen it, that might be a great way to experience it again. Because, films like this are really meant to be seen on the big screen, I feel like.
Yeah.
I mean, and I watched it at home on my TV, which is not like super tiny, but I feel like the scale and the scope of it, and like being almost surrounded.
Definitely worth that experience.
Yeah, I would imagine so.
All right. Well, thank you for checking in on today's episode of Nerds Now Playing. We'll check you out next time.
See you.